you think of rest, what springs to mind? If you're like me, you'll be thinking about an absence of stresses and suffering. You'll think of settling in for the night with a takeaway and watching something good on the TV. Now, the name Noah means comfort or rest. But the one who is called rest does not come in the context of peace and safety. It was in the midst of death and curse that the promised child called rest was born. Genesis chapter 5 verse 28, when Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son, he named him Noah, and said, "He will comfort us," or "He will give us rest in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground that the Lord has cursed." Lamech was very aware that the whole creation groans under divine judgment. The world is rigged for frustration, as one writer has put it. And it's still rigged for frustration. The curse is still around us in broken lives and broken relationships. So what do we do about that? We might pretend that the world is not really so bad. We might whistle through the graveyard to keep up our spirits. We might despair and just settle down in the rubble to await the inevitable. We might trust to our wealth and our resourcefulness to try and sidestep the curse. But Lamech does something different. He doesn't minimize the awfulness of a broken world. He acknowledges the work and toil. He doesn't pretend to master the situation out of his own resources. And he doesn't resign himself to the chaos. Instead, Lamech looks the darkness in the face. But with a defiant nevertheless, he believes in rest, in comfort, in peace. And so he names his boy Rest. Names, as we've already seen, can be expressions of faith in the Bible. Adam named his wife Eve, meaning life, even though everything around him was death. He trusted that the offspring of Eve would fix everything, and so he named his wife Mother of the Living. Names express gospel faith, and so it is in Genesis chapter 5. Lamech's name means despairing, but he sees that there's hope in his offspring. Ever since Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, the believers had been looking ahead to the seed, the offspring, who would defeat Satan and would put the world to rights. So Lamech has hope that even though his name is despairing, ahead there would be rest. Actually, all the names in Genesis 5 are significant like this. Many people down through the years have noticed how the names from Adam to Noah actually articulate the gospel when you string them together. I don't know how much credit you give to this, but I find this fascinating. Here is the meaning of all the names from Adam to Noah in Genesis chapter 5. We have man appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down teaching, his death shall send the despairing rest. I find that fascinating. You might think this is a bit suspect, but I think if God is in charge of the details in this story, then of course he can have this kind of, these details can have this kind of significance. If I'm reading a story in the newspaper, I'm not looking for the meaning of the names involved because no one has orchestrated those names. But if I watch a film and somebody is called this and somebody's called that, and if Neo is called Neo in The Matrix and Morpheus and Trinity, and then there's an author behind that and those names can have significance. Now, God has authored the events of the scriptures and therefore he has superintended the names that people have. So I'm not a total skeptic when it comes to things like this. I quite like this gospel, according to Genesis chapter 5. Man appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall send the despairing rest. Now you might say, look, there's no way that any of those 10 generations in Genesis 5 actually intended to spell out the gospel presentation over those centuries. I say, maybe not. But one, remember that Adam has been alive right up until Lamech's day. Lamech was 56 years old when Adam finally died. So there's actually quite a lot of collaboration on these names that is possible. And secondly, even if the people involved had no intention of spelling out the gospel, maybe God did. But even if you don't buy that, Lamech definitely intended to name his son Noah, and that should be gospel enough for all of us. Here is a man who is despairing, but he trusts that his offspring will be rest. Do you feel despairing at times? Do you long for true rest? It doesn't come with the absence of trouble, with a boxed set and a takeaway. True rest comes in the gospel of the offspring. Not Noah, but Jesus Christ. It comes in looking by faith to the one who brings us through judgment. Just like Noah brought them through judgment and out the other side, true comfort, true rest comes in the Lord Jesus. And we gather to Him just as Noah's family gathered to Noah. And as we gather to Jesus, He keeps us safe through the trouble and into His perfect peace. In other words, man is appointed to mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down teaching, and His death shall bring the despairing rest.